everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Jenny Fennell and I'm so happy you're here. If you are a community member and I See Dream About Anesthesia through Facebook, I'm so glad you found me here. And if you're not, I highly encourage you to look for this group on Facebook if you're an aspiring CRNA. I am here to help you every step of the way, and today I'm just going to cover what is a CRNA? What do we do? What does our typical day look like? If you stay to the end, I'm going to go over some pros and cons to being a CRNA as well. So let's go ahead and get started. So what is a day in the life of a CRNA? So it can vary quite a bit based on where you work. So I have had two different jobs. My first job right out of school, I did open heart anesthesia. I spent about 6 months working doing general cases before I joined the open heart team. Once I joined the open heart team, I did 24-hour shifts. I did a lot of OB at night. Where there was just two 24-hour CRNAs and one doc. That's typically how we ran things there. I also did 16-hour shifts, 8-hour shifts, anything to get my 40 hours. And I also, again, did open heart thoracotomies. I did TAVRs. I did EP lab, which is electrophysiology lab. But I also did general cases. I did lap choles, and I did dental days with pediatrics. I did, urology, and I did neuro. I did cranies. So I kind of did everything, which is what I was seeking out when I was done with school. I wanted to get my hands on as much as possible. After about 4 years there, we had, by that time, had a family. We have a little boy and a little girl, and I became very homesick. And so we decided to make a move to be closer to family. And since then, I have taken a job at an outpatient surgery center where we do a lot of regional blocks. And by regional, I mean like an interscalene block to block someone's shoulder, a supraclavicular block, which blocks someone's wrist or forearm for surgery. We do popliteal blocks for ankle surgery, things like that. So I've kind of had experience in both of those settings, but there's also things like ketamine clinics, for instance, or pain clinics, where patients go in there for just pain management. There's also dental clinics that take CRNAs, colonoscopy clinics, eye clinics. So there's a wide range. You could work at a small rural hospital and practice independently, or you could work at a big education center, with a lot of residents and doctors in anesthesiology. So again, it can vary quite a bit based on where you work. But what I have experience with is my first job is the attending, or the anesthesiologist would be in pre-op, and they would do most of the pre-op work for you while you got to work around 6:45. I was usually in the OR by 7 a.m. I would set up my room, and by 7:10, 7:15, I was in pre-op, seeing my patient, doing my own airway assessment, asking pertinent questions, talking with my attending to see if there's anything I need to be aware of, and make sure we had a game plan to proceed with a case. So that was typically how my morning looks. And then the attending, once you got to the room, I put the patient on the monitors. I called my attending, and the attending would come to the room for induction. They would be there. They would be the ones usually pushing the drugs. I'd be the one preparing to manage the airway. I'd mask the patient down. I would put the endotracheal tube in. And then after the airway was secured, if we needed a second IV, I would do that. The attending would leave. Or if it was an attending who liked to start IVs or had the time to start IVs, he would stay, or they would stay, and they would start the IV for me, or whatever it is, help me position the patient, whatever it is you need help with. Where I currently work, the attending still does the pre-op, and you still go to pre-op after you set up your room, and you do your own assessment, ask pertinent questions. But then once we're back in the OR, I'm the one pushing the drugs. I'm the one doing the airway. The anesthesiologist does not come to the room for induction unless you think you need them, or unless you run into problems. So it's a very more independent practice than what I was used to. At first it was an adjustment, but I actually prefer it now. It's nice. And of course, if you were to need a second set of hands, they would come to the room and help you, or you would have one of your CRNA coworkers come to help you. So that's kind of how that situation works. Once the patient is asleep, you manage the entire anesthetic. Now, don't get me wrong, you can always call the doc to the bedside to ask questions, and I definitely would. You never want to be the cowboy. You never want to manage everything by yourself, especially if you're having questions or need to run something by someone else. You always want to make sure you're taking the time to ask. But typically, you're the one providing the actual anesthetic. You're the one pushing the drugs and titrating pain medication, electrolytes, fluids, all those types of things. And typically, you work with the attending to come up with a game plan. Do they need a TIVA, which is a total IV anesthetic? And things like that is best for the patient. So you do still work as a team. You also work closely with the surgeon, and if there's something that's going on in the case that you have questions about, to ask him, and he hopefully would, or they would hopefully communicate back with you if they run into problems that, you know, could affect something up top, like their blood pressure, for instance. I'll give you guys a quick little example. For instance, I was doing an ACDNF, which is an anterior cervical fusion of someone's spinal cord, and the surgeon hit the vertebral artery. Unfortunately, the surgeon didn't communicate that with me. All I knew is all of a sudden my patient's blood pressure was 200 something systolic, and it hadn't been an issue during the whole case. I start hearing suction, so I look over, my canister has almost a liter of blood in it very, very quickly. And then I, of course, couldn't get a blood pressure the next go round. The patient's getting bradycardic. So at that point, I looked up and I said, what did you guys hit? And the PA responded, we hit the vertebral artery, which is bleeding straight from the patient's brain. So obviously, blood pressure support was key at that point, giving fluids, getting blood to the room. We ended up having to start a bigger bore IV to be able to give fluids more quickly. Long story short, the patient was fine. I was nervous about waking that patient up, but they woke up just fine. Thank God the surgeon was able to get the bleeding under control. But that's what I mean as far as you just communicate throughout the whole case and ask questions and kind of pay attention to what's going on. So you see the patient through the anesthetic. You wake the patient up once you know they have a secure, manageable airway, meaning they're not obstructing, and that they're obviously breathing adequately enough to where their end tidal CO2 is not dangerously high. And you hope that they're comfortable. You have enough pain medication on board to make sure that they're not screaming out in pain. You take them either to PACU or you can take them to the ICU. Some patients never get extubated. Some patients remain intubated and recover in the ICU intubated overnight. So that's kind of how the end of that case goes. You can do, the most cases I've ever done on an 8-hour shift is 14, and those were carpal tunnels. So real quick, like the surgery itself takes about 3 minutes, and so it almost takes longer to get the patient in the room on the monitors, slug them with propofol for the local anesthetic, and then get them over to recovery. So those are really quick cases. And then I've done, triple valve cardiac arrest cases where that takes, 6 hours. So it just totally depends on the case as far as how long you're going to be in the operating room. Of course, your coworkers come give you a morning break, a lunch break. And if you work 12-hour shifts, you should get an afternoon break as well. And depending on how busy the day is, breaks may or may not come easy. Sometimes your best chance of getting a break is to go in between cases if you're lucky enough to have a shorter case day. So that's kind of how the day looks. Again, it can vary where you work. On my days at the regional hospital, when I just do blocks, I'm the CRNA in the block room, meaning that's all I do. I don't do any actual anesthetics back in the OR. I just simply do the regional blocks. I bring the first patient in at 6:45, do their interscaling block, bring the next patient back, do the popliteal block, bring the next patient back, do the supraclavicular block, and I just keep going like that all day. That's my day. Intermittently, obviously, having breaks for lunch and things like that, and giving my coworkers breaks whenever I can. And again, if you were to work at, a dental clinic, your day would look different too, based on the type of anesthetic you provide. So I hope that answers you guys' questions about what a day in the life of a CRNA looks like. So let's quickly go over some pros and cons. Some pros to me is, as a CRNA, you get to be one-on-one with your patient. I think that's a huge pro. I also like how you work with a really small team, meaning the surgeon, surgical staff, and the anesthesiologist. You kind of work as a team to get the patient through the surgery safely. I felt like as an ICU nurse, you were just kind of, on the sidelines a little bit, where as a CRNA, you're actually right down in the action. You're the one doing it, and you're actually the resource. You're the person people go to ask questions. The surgeons look up to you. They know that you can manage the airway. They know that you can help stabilize them through their surgery. So you have a very important job, and you have a lot of responsibility as a CRNA, which I like. I also really like the complexity of the case. I really like thinking through pathophysiology and pharmacology and how no two patients are alike, and how one anesthetic for this lap chole could be totally different for the next patient for their lap chole. So everyone handles pain medication differently. Everyone, handles, some patients, one patient might be really dry and dehydrated while the next one might not be. So again, every anesthetic is different in how you manage it. And I think that's really fascinating and really unique. While I don't like to be in a critical situation all the time, you are, as a CRNA, expected to be able to react very quickly to something that's unexpected. I told you guys about the patient whose vertebral artery got hit during an ACDNF. but a lot of times a patient might bronchospasm or laryngospasm, or they may be a difficult airway that you weren't anticipating. So there's a lot of clinical scenarios that kind of can happen out of the blue that you're not anticipating. It doesn't mean anything bad's going to come out of it. It just means that you're going to have to use your knowledge and your skills to kind of overcome that. And I find that definitely keeps me on my toes. I don't get bored. Now, don't get me wrong. Sometimes you sit in a case and it is a slow case and there's not a whole lot to do, but you sit and you chart. It's really, in my opinion, I kind of welcome those breaks every now and then. It's kind of a nice mental checkout where you're not always stressed out, because our job can be very high stress. So I'm trying to think if I mentioned everything else in there. I do think it's nice for holidays, weekends. Now don't get me wrong, some hospitals will have call responsibility, but a lot of places, at least that I've been to, call and weekend are all optional. Where I currently work, I'm expected to take 2 to 3 call weekends out of the year. It doesn't mean that I'll go in and work those weekends. It just depends if they have cases scheduled or not. If they don't have cases scheduled, then I get call pay, but I don't actually go in. And that's only 2 or 3 times out of the entire year that I have to do that. I don't have to work nights anymore. As an ICU nurse, I was working every other weekend, and I was working nights, and felt like I was missing a lot of things by doing that. There's opportunity to pick up overtime as a CRNA. So you can pick up weekends, holidays. You can even stay late. Like I say, if you work an 8-hour shift, you can stay late and pick up overtime that way. Realistically, you guys, there's less body fluids. You still potentially deal with vomit and sputum and boogers, those kind of things. But you're not, doing all the things that you do as a bedside nurse and taking care of, everyone, all that. And I'm not going to have to go into details on that, but there's less body fluids in anesthesia. I think there's less pain and suffering. So when I was an ICU nurse, I was really struggling with seeing death and dying all the time, and watch my patient suffer for a week straight and just slowly deteriorate before my eyes before they would die. And it was just very, very, it was humbling, but it was just so hard to watch. And I hated watching the family suffer on top of that. It was very disheartening. It took a lot out of me to do that for as long as I did, which was only 3 years. As a CRNA, I don't see that kind of heartache all the time. Don't get me wrong. In the 5 years I practiced, 2 of my particular patients did pass away on the operating room table, but that's 2 in 5 years versus that was happening to me every single month, if not multiple times a month as an ICU nurse. So that to me is a huge difference, and I don't have a hard time like I did as an ICU nurse dealing with all the death, suffering, and dying that I was seeing as an ICU nurse. Let's see what else. Obviously money. So, a lot of people know about the money. That's one of the first things I think pops in people's head when they hear CRNAs. They think that we're like loaded. I think we make good money. We still only make, probably almost like a half or a third of what anesthesiologists make, and we do pretty much do the same career, but I still think we get paid really good money for what we do. I'll tell you right now, the average CRNA, if you were to Google on Google, they say 160K. That's probably about accurate. My first job out of school was 165. On a high year, I made 186, and that was with overtime. When I dropped my hours, now I'm back down to 165. So it is, I was only making about 50 as a bedside nurse. So it is a significant pay increase. So that's, an obvious pro. Some of the cons is, for me, the biggest one is the fact that you can get stuck. So sometimes if you're supposed to be done at 3:00, but they add on a bunch of surgery cases, you may get stuck past your shift. That does tend to happen, especially more so towards the end of the year when people have met their deductible and they want to go have elective surgery. So that does tend to happen. That can be annoying when you have an appointment you have to make, or you have a commitment outside of work that you need to make it to. That can become disheartening after some time. But what I will say is you also can get out early some days, meaning you might get out at noon one day, but then down the road you might get stuck till 5 p.m. So again, overall, it all equals out. It's not like you really get stuck a lot. And when you do get stuck, you get paid for it. But it just does stink to miss your appointments because of it. But in my experience, if you have something that's really important, you can talk to your coworkers and trade in order of being, so like if you're not first out, you're last of the 8 hours out that day, you can trade with your coworker and just get them next time around. And so people are pretty good about doing things like that to help you out. So it's not, there's ways around it. I'm trying to think what that's like, to me, that's like the biggest con. It's a lot of responsibility, and you do get put in these really high stress situations. So if that's not something you think you can manage, then this might not be the right career for you. Another thing too is I've been told by other CRNAs that they miss the bedside interaction with their coworkers. You definitely don't get as much one-on-one time with your coworkers as a CRNA because you're in the operating room most of the time. So I only have 10 seconds left because YouTube cuts me off at 15 minutes, but I hope that helped you guys, and I look forward to telling you guys more. Subscribe and follow me on Facebook. All right, take care. Bye.